So as of now, I own and am currently recording on a professionally used high quality camera. And other than like a few one-off gigs, I pretty much only use this camera for recording my YouTube videos, which is incredibly overkill. And not everyone has the luxury of owning a camera like this, but what pretty much everyone does have at this point is a phone. But even more people don't actually own the latest and greatest version, including myself. And what I have here is the iPhone 11, which came out in 2019. And today, I think you could pick it up for around $170. And oh yeah, by the way, the camera setup I'm currently recording on cost over $5,000 brand new. That hurts.
And that camera is the Sony FX3, which is one of the most popular. But for most people, the good old phone camera is the only one you'll need.
And what you actually might not know is the default camera app on your phone could actually be screwing up your video quality. But on my iPhone, I'm gonna use a few tricks and apps to bring out the maximum quality possible on a going on 6-year-old phone. Now, the first obvious, but still very important thing you have to check before you record a video on your phone is, do you have enough storage? And I happen to have the 64GB version in the big 2025. Somehow I'm making it work though, but this will be enough since I'm just recording a few clips here. And this next tip is by far the most important one of this entire video, and it's this little free app called Blackmagic Camera. So pretty much this app unlocks all of the controls to your camera that you would get in a professional one like the Sony FX3. And what's even crazier is this has some features that the FX3 doesn't, and I wish it did. And my third tip is just to generally make sure you understand which cameras and lenses are on your phone. For the iPhone 11, there's a wide at 26mm and an ultra wide at 13mm. And I mean, there is a front camera, but if you're trying to get the best video quality, the back ones are significantly better. But here's what we're gonna do to actually test these cameras. I have an 8-shot shot list, and then I'm also gonna bring it into DaVinci Resolve, which is a professional color grading software. So I'll show you exactly which adjustments I did make, and then also the final side-by-side results between the two cameras. For my phone, I have a little mount adapted to the tripod plate so it can fit right in there. And then my FX3 can do the same thing. I'm also gonna compare the default camera app to the Blackmagic one because there is a difference.
Before you actually press record, I'd recommend going through and double checking all the settings, like making sure your bitrate is set to max, and also that you're in the best resolution for the highest quality.
We got the waveform, we got the audio metering, we have the lens, we have the frames per second, and I will be doing a slow-mo shot later, so we're gonna see how slow-mo it can actually go. And we have the shutter speed, which you have 0 control over in the regular camera app. So I have it set to 1/48. A good rule of thumb to get natural motion blur is to have it double your frame rate. If I wave my hand in front, you can see how it gets a little blurry. And I'd say I crank this up, there's a lot less motion blur and it looks, you know, kind of iPhone-y.
And there's also aperture, which seems to be fixed at 1.8. On my FX3, I'll be keeping it at 2.8, which will be as close as possible.
You have control over the ISO, which is really nice. And this is where iPhone footage tends to look bad, because when it's a low light situation and you crank it up to make it brighter, that's when it gets noisy and grainy. And you also have control over your white balance, which if you crank up, the image gets warmer. If you crank down, the image gets cooler. And then you also have tint controls, which dictates how green or magenta your image is. And we have a whole other bunch of tools on the side here, which I will definitely be taking advantage of in some of the other shots. So we are ready to record. That was very anticlimactic. And now for the professional camera, the FX3, I went ahead and tried to get as close to the same angle as possible, as well as dialing the lens into 26mm. We have an ISO button. We have a white balance button, which I will adjust a little bit. And we are in 4K 24 frames as well. Now I do have my FX3 set up a bit differently. Instead of shutter speed, I have shutter angle. And instead of like the regular ISO, I have it in Cine EI mode. So even though it's a different number, it is still doing virtually the same exact thing. But with that being said, we're ready to hit the nice big red record button there. Okay, I think that's a solid frame right there. And let's go for it. And go. Perfect. Now we are in a B-roll style setup where I'm just going to be grabbing this mouse and clicking it around, acting like I am working. Keyword acting. We all know I don't work. Okay, now on the FX3, I think the only thing I'll set is the focus point, and I think everything else is good to go. What I want to try to do is set manual focus. It brings up this nice dial that you can kind of just scroll through, and with focus peaking on with the red highlighting exactly where you're in focus, this is a like super controlled and smooth experience. So I'm gonna get it sitting kind of right in the middle there. And again, manual focusing on the FX3, it is a very similar experience. Alright, so I've been trying to keep all of these tests realistic, but this is probably the most realistic one. I'm always recording myself talking here. And again, this is another one where I wanted just to record the regular iPhone app versus the Blackmagic app and the results there. What I wish the FX3 had that this does have is false color. So I'm gonna flip that on right now. Pretty much what it does is it maps a specific color to specific exposures. So the warmer colors means it's brighter, and then the cooler colors like dark purple means it's dark. And I just realized this brings me to a dead end because I can't actually see my iPhone screen when I'm sitting there. Hopefully I did this correctly and my skin is kind of either looking light gray, a little bit of pink, maybe a little bit of green. So even though the FX3 technically doesn't have false color, what I did is I downloaded a LUT and I was able to upload it and I can switch to it. So this, I mean, pretty much does the same thing. It just doesn't have the little chart and it's not native. But when you call yourself a cinema camera and you're missing a pretty basic cinema camera feature and you're getting beaten out by a free app that works on a 6-year-old iPhone, that's embarrassing, Sony. And the other place where I sometimes record my A-roll talking head, less formally known as my YAP sessions, is right here at my desk. Again, by using the iPhone's back camera, you do get the highest quality image out of it, but you aren't actually able to see what you look like on screen, which is debatably a bigger issue than just having a little bit less quality. But you know, my exposure should be good. That is embarrassing. My phone or the Blackmagic app ran out of storage. That's the first thing I said. Make sure your phone has enough storage. And I overlooked it myself. I deserve this. And on the FX3, I have the absolute privilege of a flip out screen. Now I can see myself. So this is the one shot that won't be in 4K 24 frames. And instead, I'm just gonna go as slow motion as these cameras can actually go. So first, let's go to the settings here. Let's go to resolution and 720p. Let's go to frames per second. And I think this can go, oh, only 60.
So I found out you can do 240 frames, but it's only on the slow motion mode in the default camera app. But for the video, I'll just stick to the Blackmagic app.
So let's go back to HD and we can put it into 120 frames. I'll be performing a good old hand wash to get the full slow motion experience. And now for the FX3, and I'm recording on my iPhone here, and I don't have enough tripod, so I'm currently using a jar of peanut butter. Now that's what I like to call innovative. And on the FX3, I can flip it into S&Q mode, which stands for slow and quick. And we can get up to, oh, what? Well, the other day I could do 240 frames on HD on the FX3. I guess that just doesn't want to work today. Maybe it has something to do with my SD cards. Maybe it's just a knowledge issue, but I'll do 4K, 120 frames, and I'm gonna wash my hands again. Wow, this whole test took a lot longer than I thought, but I can for sure say my hands were clean. All right, so we have all the clips here in DaVinci Resolve. The best part is that this software is completely free. Now, the hardware to run the software isn't, but you don't need both of your kidneys anyways. Now, to actually get the footage off of the Blackmagic camera app was a little weird. What you have to do is go into media, and then you can see all of your clips here. You tap on it, you hit the little share button. And personally, I took advantage of the Apple ecosystem and airdropped it, which is super easy. But if you can't airdrop it because you're on Windows or don't have an iPhone or something, what you can do is click save video and then upload it to Google Drive and download it from there. Okay, so I just went through the 8 recorded test shots. The first thing I actually wanted to compare was the default camera app versus the Blackmagic one, both unadjusted. As you can see, this is the default camera app. It looks a little more green, a little more yellow, and then the Blackmagic one looks a little bit more magenta. And for this one, it's very noticeable. This is on the default camera app, and we go to the Blackmagic one. Not only is it more magenta significantly, it's also more zoomed out. And just to be clear, this was on the same tripod and it was not moved. What I assume's happening here is on the default camera app, it has stabilization built in. So it crops in a little bit, and depending on where you're shaking, it can kind of offset it. Like if you look at the skin on the default app, it looks almost like plasticky. And you look at it on the Blackmagic, it's just a little bit more natural. So I think that the Blackmagic app does create better results, But for a lot of people, the point of recording something on a phone isn't to get the best shot as possible, it's just to capture the moment as easy as possible. And that's what the default app does. But I think if you want to start making videos and you can't afford a camera, the Blackmagic camera app is not only free, but has all the features that you will eventually need to learn if you want to get into using a camera anyways. So I'm going to super quickly walk through the FX3 adjustments and then a little more in depth go through the Blackmagic camera recording adjustments. And then finally, I'll show the exact side-by-sides of the two.
And for this, I won't be going into how I made each adjustment, just which adjustments I made. That way you can just apply the basic principle of it to whatever software you use.
So if you take a look at the FX3 recordings here, they look terrible. That's because it's recorded, and this is also being recorded in what's called log footage. And simplified answer is it takes the most detail in the highlights and shadows and records it to look like this to maintain that. And when you're editing, you have to just simply convert it back to look normal again. Then I give it an exposure adjustment just to brighten it a bit. It looked a little warm, so I added a little bit of cooler tones. And then I used a mask and darkened the outside of it to kind of use it as a vignette. I feel like that's just like a very small adjustment that helps make the subject pop. Then I added a little bit of contrast just with a pretty simple S curve. Gave it just like a hint more of saturation. And that was it. For a lot of the shots, I pretty much did the same thing, so I'm not going to show all of them, but this is one I'll definitely show. This is before adjustments and then after adjustments. I'll just walk through it one by one. Made an exposure adjustment. I thought it looked kind of green and yellow, so I balanced the color out. I again added the mask just to darken it around the subject. I added a little bit of contrast and a touch of saturation, and this probably won't even be noticeable on YouTube, but I adjusted the skin just a little bit. Then I noticed that the window looked pretty bright behind me here, so I adjusted that specifically. And that's a pro of this camera because, again, it can retain so much of that detail. And now for the adjustments that I made from the phone recordings on the Blackmagic app, starting with the first plant shot. This is the before and the after. I pretty much just added a bunch of contrast, did a little bit of saturation, and again, I did the mask thing just to make the subject pop a little more. And here's where some of the differences are starting to be noticed. If we take this shot here, the before and after, that still looks great. But for the FX3 recordings, you can see how much more of a separation from the background and foreground there is with how blurry it is. And that probably has to do with the fact that the iPhone camera sensor is just this one little small lens, and compared to the whole FX3 full frame sensor, it just doesn't compare, and there's not much you can do. And if we take a look at the mouse clicking shot, this is the before and then after. I tried to just make it look a little more natural. The skin looked a little yellow, so I tried to make that look a little more magenta. But if we go full screen here, this is again the before and then the after. But take a look at this little folder here and then also up here. If I turn it off again, it's a whole different color. And by making that color adjustment, it absolutely just tears apart that part of the image. Now the fix for this is easy. You just get it right in camera and you don't mess up like I did. But I thought I got it right. It looked natural here. It could be the color accuracy of my screen. It could have something to do with my screen protector. There are a lot of elements that can affect the way you see colors. Now for this segment, this is the before and this is the after. Step by step, I adjusted the exposure slightly, balanced out the colors a lot. I added the mask. I added a lot of the saturation back that got wiped from my skin. And then talking about the skin, look how smooth that looks. That just doesn't really look natural and real. So I added back a lot of that detail just to make it look less plasticky. And for this part, it came out pretty good straight out of the camera, so I barely adjusted anything, to be honest. For the slow motion shot, just very simple correction, pretty much just contrast. And of course, the point of this one was to slow it down, and I did do that, but it looks kind of choppy. Now this could be because I was screen recording on my iPhone and recording the video on it. And if we take a look at the FX3 shot here, which was recorded in the same frame rate, you could see how much smoother it actually is. But I mean, the iPhone camera really held up. Obviously the FX3, especially in a shot like this, looks significantly better.
What I, and probably even the untrained eye, can notice at a glance is the color depth, the highlight and shadow roll-offs, and the skin look much better. It's a much less harsh looking image.
Like, it's designed as a video camera with helpful features, while the iPhone is designed as a phone with video as a feature. Like, I think generally it's pretty incredible that that is possible, and never mind what phones have today. And I do acknowledge that a lot of people are probably stuck in iPhone recording land wishing they had a camera like this, and although I do eventually plan on using this camera for professional work where it is necessary. This definitely isn't, and I do not take that for granted. I'm sure if you give an actual video professional an iPhone with the Blackmagic camera app, and you give me like one of those Alexa 65 cameras, they will make a better video because they know how to use the tools better.
So it's always good to keep in mind it's less about what camera you use and more about what you know about using it.
This video took way too long to make, so hopefully you got something out of it, and if you want to see more of this, feel free to subscribe, and thank you for watching.